I often wonder what other people get up to behind closed doors. They may not collect like I do, but I like to think they use their homes to collect their thoughts, and if nothing else. I suppose everybody's a collector of something. Merkin's the name, John Merkin. This is the place I live, which is called the Warehouse. I'm a record collector. This mania began when I was about 5 years old, and my parents bought me a wind-up record player, and I inherited a large collection of 78s, these kind of things. Oh, here's a classic. Mrs. Higgins Goes Shopping, parts 1 and 2 on the old Regal's Honophone label. And this went on until I was about 12 years old, when suddenly I discovered pop music. I think my parents had probably kept me away from it, work of the devil, this kind of thing. But suddenly I was ill in bed and I found on Wavelength 208, Radio Luxembourg, and pop music came into my life, and it changed my life, I think. The first single I bought was the Beatles' Can't Buy Me Love, and after that I moved on to a few LPs. Rolling Stones were my first big favourite band, really. I remember going to see them live at the Taunton Odeon, it was in those days, back in about 1964. And Millie was the support act, and she got booed off stage, and she went off in tears. It was very sad, actually. And the most exciting thing of that night, apart from having my first cigarette, I was 13 at the time, was to walk out of the theatre and bump straight into Mick Jagger, who actually trod on my shoes and, well, told me to piss off, but I didn't hold it against him. It's hard to know how many LPs I've actually got. It's about 5,000, I'd say. And of course there's loads of cassettes as well, probably about 3,000 cassettes there. Amongst those cassettes I've got every top 40 show on the on Radio 1 since 1972, which gives me a complete history of the charts. You can choose any month you want to from any year you want, and you can relive that month. I've now got a record list, all these LPs here are on a database. This started about 15 years ago. I've got a big mailing list of about 150 people, and I used to send these out monthly, LPs wanted for £1 or less, and this has developed into this huge great list you can see here. 8 pages worth of, this is all LPs from A to Z that I own. Now the idea is that if people want to borrow any of these things off me, they can. I could do tapes for them. I know it's illegal, but cost of LPs these days, it's worthwhile, I think, for people to get in contact with me if they want any of my records on tape. Well, I've had a collector around here. I met him at a record fair, and he came around one evening, he went through all these LPs, put them out one by one, and made me an offer I couldn't refuse on a few of them, and quite a few on the Harvest label I sold. That was a collector's item at the time for him, and he gave me £200 for about 5 then. But I don't like selling LPs or singles or anything. Once I bought a record, it's there for life, hopefully. I've started buying CDs recently. I don't like CDs. I've got a campaign against some devil spawn technology as far as I'm concerned. Tinny, tiny, shiny beer mats, but it's come to the stage now where if you want to get every track by an artist, you need to get the CD, because they've got a nasty habit of adding extra tracks on. And one of the hooks for getting people to buy their old LPs again is to re-release them on a CD with an extra track, otherwise unavailable. It's got about 10 years to run as far as I'm concerned, and we're back to vinyl again. The technology is already there to play your old vinyl LPs with perfect clarity by the same devices as CD, using lasers, just reading the grooves, and you'll find that within 10 years everyone will be back on vinyl again. It's a purer sound. It's not nearly as tinny as you find the CDs are these days. Much warmer sound. Lots of people I know are using videotapes to tape music on, because the sound of that from CDs sounds much purer than it would on an actual CD player. I have found some incredible bargains in my time. Beatles LPs in mint condition in stereo for only 20p in second-hand shops. Once I found an entire collection of Tamla Motown hits, volumes 1 to 7, which is an area that I'd previously not had many such items. All these are 20 pence each for an LP with 20 tracks on, so it probably works out as a fraction of a pence per track for all those absolute classics. I was a schoolboy in the 60s, and when psychedelia came along it was the big thing for me. I went out and bought all the LPs by people like Pink Floyd and all those big 60s psychedelic bands. My particular interest there's lots of obscure bands like Tomorrow, Sally's for Four, people like this who you probably never heard of. But I used to listen to Top Gear by John Peel's show on Radio 1 on Sunday afternoons, and used to tape most of those. Lots of very rare live sessions, which unfortunately I've now lost because it was all on open spool tape, which has disappeared over the years. Trying showing some classic material there, but I've still got all the LPs of this era, and it, I think, is to me my favourite. The 70s came along. I was at college then, and it seemed exciting at the time. We were into bands like Yes and Supertramp and 10cc. Looking back now, they were bleak times, really. All these big super groups. David Bowie was the one for me really in the 70s. He was the person who kept his originality, and you can still hear those old LPs today and get something from them. But the scene was bland until punk came along. That changed my life again, really. The 80s were trying times, not just for me but for everyone, I think, what with the miners' strike and Thatcherism. And I think my taste veered towards more political music in those days, things like Billy Bragg, and I was a member of the Anti-Nazi League. And all of a sudden the band called the Smiths came shining through like a beacon in the bleak times there. And for me, everything I wanted in a band in one package. Intelligent lyrics, the guitar playing, just the whole idea of the Smiths was something that really affected me. My last great heroes, I think. Now in the 90s we seem to be in another creative surge. There's this whole the American grunge scene, which I was initially a bit wary of, but which is now becoming quite fascinating to me. There's a handful of very good new British bands. The last couple of months I've seen Suede, who I reckon are going to be an enormous band, Radiohead, Kingmaker, quite a few bands that up and coming. The Rocking Birds sort of merging the new country rock sound together. So I don't give up hope with music. There's always something new on the horizon. It's been suggested that collecting is very much a male preserve, but I'm not convinced by the logic of this. Females tend to collect things like trinkets and shoes and clothes, whereas men perhaps go for more things that they can identify with, as opposed to more personal things which women collect. I find it, quite a few partners of mine in the past have found my collecting a bit of a nuisance, I think, to say the least. I've had quite a few arguments about what records should be played at certain times. And lots of people don't like hanging around me while I'm going around record shops. It's not their idea of a good afternoon out, which you might find surprising to believe. I think of music as the soundtrack of your life. All your memories, past girlfriends, places you've been, holidays, friends you've known, they're all remembered by the sound of just one record that at that time was important to you. I can go through my collection, pick out a record, and all those memories are come flooding back. I don't really know why I am a collector. I think there's something that the singer Patti Smith said once, that she was about to commit suicide one day, and she said, well, I can't do this because I'll never hear the next Rolling Stones LP. And I think there's something like that in me, really. The fact that you never know what's going to come up next, what's around the corner, what's in that record shop just in the next street. I can't really put this into words, but if I visit people who've got, say, 4 CDs and that's it, I think there must be something missing in their lives. This might sound terribly corny, but when I was 18 I heard that Doors record, When the Music's Over, and there's a line in there that summed it all up. It says, music is your only friend until the end. And no matter what happens to you, how bad your life is, friends might leave you, let you down, music's always there, and I think that's the way I live my life.
Ideally, I would love to have a museum, not a grand museum, but just a memory jogger, because people that come around the house and they see things, they say, oh, my granny used to have one of those, or my parents had one of those. And that's what I would like, a kind of memory jogger museum. For a brief spell, I had a market stall and I used to sell 1920s and 30s stuff. But I found it very painful. I mean, this is like the true collector talking now. I found it so painful to actually part with any of the stuff. So I thought I'd go for a period that I didn't like. And at the time, I didn't think I liked the 50s. And that stuff was around in abundance. I mean, I just got so much of it so fast. But when I'd got it all together, I actually saw great charm in it. And so that then became very difficult to part with. I stopped doing the stall because I couldn't bear to part with it, and that's the stuff that I've still got a lot of. This piece illustrates the joy of finding stuff. I got this just recently in a charity shop. I was just in there browsing, and in walked a bloke with a box full of stuff and this particular statue. As soon as I saw it, I could feel my heart racing. I thought, I've got to get that. And as he went out to the car to get some more stuff, I said to the woman behind the counter, as casually as I could, how much is this? And she said, oh, I don't know, £5. So I just casually said, OK, well, I'll buy that. I had a market stall for a while, and I realised while I was doing that in fact, I mean, I'm not a seller, I am a real magpie, I'm a real collector. The joy for me was actually setting everything out and seeing it looking great, and people would come up and say, how much is this? And I would actually put them off buying things by telling them that things were broken and this wasn't for sale, that wasn't for sale. And when they say what was for sale, and I'd show them some bits of tat that I was trying to palm off, obviously they didn't want that. But I just couldn't bring myself to sell this stuff. I mean, I would spend most of the time wandering around to everybody else's stall buying things in. That for me was the excuse, you know, and I'd think, well, maybe I'll sell something, but I very rarely did. Why I'm a collector, I really couldn't say, other than I think it is a kind of illness. It's the same sort of mentality as an alcoholic, a drug addict, I'm sure. I mean, it's a kind of excessive personality. It's a particular type of personality. I mean, I know that I am that type of person with other things, so collecting really is just a natural progression, but it's not dangerous to health, only to the pocket. I'm extremely fond of this cocktail cabinet, purely and simply because when I was a child, my parents had one almost identical to this as I can remember. And as a little kid, I mean, it used to puzzle me for hours and hours, and I used to stand there just pulling down the drawer, and I couldn't work out where that light came from, and I'd kind of try and pull it open really quickly so that I could get the light, and then it would go off when I closed it. I couldn't work out how it did that at all. I don't often spend very much money on things if I can help it, but this television set, I just had to have it. It cost me £40, which I think was an absolute bargain. I don't think you can ever have enough. And you might see something and you think, if I have that, that's going to make my collection perfect. And you get that thing. But then 2 days later, a day later, you see something else and you think, I've got to have that. There is no end to it. You cannot stop. This appliance is one of the most bizarre things I think that I've collected, and I wouldn't like to try this on myself at all, but according to the booklet that went with it, it was a cure-all for headaches, baldness, constipation, earache, toothache, you name it. To me it looks like some horrible Frankenstein type invention. I wouldn't recommend it to adults, let alone children. A lot of the stuff I get, I see as a kind of rescue mission. This photograph, in fact, I rescued from a charity shop, and it's quite sad, I think. This woman was presented, obviously, with this photograph after 40 years' service to WD and H.O. Wills, and she's called Mrs. Small, or Miss Small, I should say, because women weren't allowed to marry if they worked for Wills. If they married, they lost their job. So she obviously never married, and this photograph ended up in a junk shop, which I think is incredibly sad. If, God forbid, there were a fire in my house, the things that I would, without hesitation, make a grab for, first of all, would be A, my 2 cats, and B, my 2 guitars. Then I might go back and rescue a few of the statues if there was time. I do think about what will happen to this stuff when I eventually pass over to the other side, to that great collection in the sky. And it would be great if the things could stay together. I mean, I've thought about it, and I mean, I would like to leave, if I didn't have my own museum, I would like to leave it to some museum, because I think it is quite an invaluable collection.